All right, welcome to the algorithm coming up for week 18. The previous week, 6 and 9. Those were games short. For anyone who watched Monday Night Football, certainly a very tragic game um, for uh, uh, for the Buffalo Bills player. Uh, so that game is not complete. I'm not going to count it for anything, but I would say that wish him well, his family well. That was tough to watch. Um, but overall, it was not a great week for picks. But that notwithstanding, you can expect to have off weeks when so many games are so close. So let's go ahead and get into it. Okay, for the first game, we got Kansas City versus the Raiders. Kansas City is favored by 7.5 points. Um, Again, the last week is always just difficult to pick because you never know when teams have motivation sometimes to take their foot off the accelerator because they're trying to rest folks up. Uh, and then likewise, teams like the Raiders, who had a great showing last week. You got guys who are playing for contracts, and we saw that last week. And this is a conference rivalry game. It's going to be a close one. So with this one here, I'm going to take the under. The raw numbers have Kansas City by 5.5. Um, if you do the correlated point spread, if you look at the raw points, you're going to see that it's going to be closer to that above that 9. But then when I adjust it, and that's what you look at right here, is it saying, hey, the model has been overperforming, or let me phrase that, giving too much credit to Kansas City, not enough credit to the Raiders. Realistically speaking, it's probably not quite as much, but 7.5 point spread. They're playing it in Vegas. And quite frankly, I think the Raiders are probably motivated to come out and do well, particularly with Jarrett Stidham. When we look at the run pass charts, this is always going to be this is going to be interesting. It always is. Again, Patrick Mahomes can put the yard can put up the yards, can put up the points. Um, I think a lot of these numbers over here, all of these are pretty much going to be invalid for the Raiders, just because of the quarterback change. But what I would point out is you can never underestimate the ability of the Chiefs to put up some explosiveness. But it'll be interesting to see what the Raiders put up this week. And so I'm going to go ahead and take the under with that big point spread. Tennessee versus Jacksonville. Jacksonville is favored by 6.5 points. I'm going to go ahead and take Jacksonville. Although I would point out Tennessee tried a new quarterback this week, and he actually looked really good, I thought. Um, the So the raw points are right around that, either three point for the correlated, closer to, and it's a little bit more than that for the raw scores. When I look at um, the adjusted for Jacksonville, it says Jacksonville should do quite a bit better than what the model predicts. And so with that, I think Jacksonville's got more to play for. Look at the run pass charts over here. Uh, the Tennessee's running game obviously really stands out. The biggest thing that I would really point out is they're trying out new quarterbacks with Tennessee. This last kid looked really good, a lot better than Malik Willis, who they had been playing. Um, I think you can expect to see a still a strong running game from Tennessee, but overall a much more balanced approach from Jacksonville. And I think Jacksonville has been improving quite a bit overall throughout the year as well, which is interesting to see. So, all right, Baltimore versus Cincinnati. At the time that I checked ESPN, is it had TBD, so I'm assuming that that's probably going to be somewhat close to even. Uh, with that, um, I'm showing that Cincinnati or that Baltimore actually has a. Uh, if you look at the raw numbers here, Baltimore is showing Baltimore has a slight advantage. But then when you look at the corrected values is it showing that Cincinnati should win this by quite a bit, which is an important thing to point out. So that's what notice this minus 55. That's the difference. The model has under predicted by 55 points the total points for versus against, and meanwhile it's over predicted for the Ravens, which is also kind of par for the course when it comes to heavy running teams like that. And then, quite frankly, you just look at how well Cincinnati's been playing here lately. And again, it is the end of the year, so we'll see. But that's like I want to go to the run pass charts. Again, anyone who watches NFL is going to know that um, Cincinnati can really put up some yards. They started off kind of slow. And then I also think when you look over here at Baltimore, I think that their second string quarterback also got hurt. So they're kind of in a peril right now. So I feel more comfortable with the excuse me, I've got a bit of a cold. The model is showing that the adjusted values for Cincinnati are going to hold up, and I think when you look at the trends, that makes sense as well. Next, Tampa Bay versus Atlanta. Atlanta is favored by 4.5 points. The model likes Tampa Bay, and when I adjust the model or take the adjusted values, then it really likes Tampa Bay. Again, it is the end of the year, which is always difficult to tell. So that might be a game where Tampa says we're just going to go ahead and sit out Tom Brady. Tom Brady might just say, I'm not missing the game. I'm going to go out and I'm going to light it up. This last weekend, Tom Brady showed why he is the GOAT, and it's really difficult sometimes to pick against him. But then again, that team is still not a great team. When we go to the run pass chart, uh, again, Tom Brady's going to pass the ball, and then Atlanta is going to have that more balanced approach. And right now, the model is showing that the ball control values over here with just a bit more explosiveness is tipping that balance in favor of Tampa Bay. Okay, New England versus Buffalo. Buffalo is favored by 7.5 points. The model of the raw correlated value has it between Buffalo by 2. The raw average scores have Buffalo by about 4, 3 or 4. But it's only when I take the corrected values, and really what it boils down to is the model has over predicted reliably said that the Patriots would perform better than what they did, and likewise it said that Buffalo would not do as well as they actually did. That's what leads to this significant point difference here. Do I think it's going to be a 20-point favorite for Buffalo? Probably not. But that notwithstanding, um, uh, uh, it does corroborate this bigger point spread. Then when you look at the run pass charts, um, I as much as people like to ding on Bill Belichick, he doesn't have any real stars on the team that I can think of, but they put up some consistent teams. That's for darn sure. The running game here is going to make a difference. Excuse me. Um, and then just Josh Allen's capability to really light it up over here. And then when we come over here, certainly I don't see a lot of difference in terms of the explosiveness over here. Certainly Buffalo has had some ball control issues. Anyone who's watched Buffalo's gotten frustrated with that. So that'll certainly could potentially play a factor here. Next game, Minnesota versus Chicago. Minnesota is favored by 6 points. I'm going to take Chicago just because you watch Minnesota, you look at their points, and that's what kind of bears out here as well. Is it's just saying, hey, Minnesota should win. Minnesota just does not blow out their opponents. They just don't. They're playing at Chicago. We'll see what either team has left in the tank at the end of the season. I'm sorry I did not update the scores before I ran the model. last night kind of threw me off a bit with that game. But realistically speaking, um, given how poorly Minnesota played in this last game, Minnesota I don't think has really impressed a whole lot throughout the year anyhow. We'll see what Chicago has. Chicago has managed to be a poor team that can sometimes show some fight. Um, so, but with that, Minnesota is also just shown to be a team that can really just let a team hang around, which is never a good thing. So, next game, Houston against Indianapolis. Indianapolis is just a poor team. Houston, I think, is a lot better than what their record really reflects. The raw model is saying that